Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. It's National Inclusion Week, hooray! It runs from the 23rd of September to the 29th of September this year, and it was developed by Inclusive Employers. National Inclusion Week is an annual week of workplace activities and events that highlight the importance of inclusion across the UK. It's a unique opportunity to get connected and engage with people who are passionate about inclusion in your workplace and beyond. But this term inclusion, what does it actually mean? Well, I've taken a dictionary definition, and according to one dictionary, it says, inclusion is the action or state of including or of being included with a group or structure. Another definition I found says that all people, regardless of their abilities, disability, or healthcare needs, have the right to be respected and appreciated as valuable members of their community. So in the workplace, it's about being and feeling included, being able to join in and feel welcomed regardless of your background, social standing, or health diagnosis. And there's been a lot written, so much written, every year more and more, papers, books, etc., about inclusive leadership. But what about the fact that we all need to feel and be included? Charlotte Sweeney and Fleur Bothwick capture the definition of equality, diversity and inclusion in their book, Inclusive Leadership, as follows. Equality is being invited to the room. Diversity is getting a seat at the table. Inclusion is sharing your views and being heard. An inclusive leader enables all of this to happen. Experts in the field of diversity and inclusion all have their own perspectives on how this plays out. The naysayers would have you believe that inclusion is about being nice and fluffy. I know I'm biased, but inclusion extends well beyond this perspective. Again, I'm going back to that awful phrase, business sense, but it does make clear and coherent business sense. In today's environment, it's not a case of profits or people. The two are interconnected and not mutually exclusive. I always say if you treat your people well with respect, dignity and worth, productivity increases, productivity equals profits, productivity equals retention of staff, happiness equals attracting talent. It really is a win-win situation. So, how are diversity and inclusion made visible in the workplace? I think equality is the aspect that's protected by law, and diversity is the manifestation. So the examples are as follows. Age would be life stages, disability, the experience of barriers. It's not the disability in and of itself, it's the way in which people who happen to have impairments or disability can or can't interact with the environment. Gender identity, stroke transitioning, so binary, non-binary and gender reassignment. Race and ethnicity equates to nationality and culture. Religion and belief to faith and ideological beliefs. Sex, well, that's binary or non-binary. Sexual orientation manifests as sexual identity. Pregnancy and maternity, family status. Marital and civil partnership status as family status and choices. Well, so we're all protected, right? So it's fine. That's what I hear a lot. But we still need to have the discussion. Because it's easy to assume that if we feel included, so does everyone else. That's often where things go wrong and we miss the blind spots. Systems are set up in ways to favour people in charge, and in the West, this means white men of a particular age, background and sexual orientation. Interestingly, heterosexual married men with children more often than not hold the most powerful positions in the UK. And I find it very interesting how that's not the same for women, or particularly women of colour. Here are some stats you might find useful about the UK. The gender pay gap for all employees, that's full and part-time, still stands at 17.9% in favour of men. It's estimated that black and minority ethnic staff currently miss out on around £3.2 billion, yes that's right, £3.2 billion a year due to an ethnicity gap. And even though the gender pay gap is a legal requirement now, there's still discussions going on about the ethnicity pay gap and whether that should be legally reported on. And I really hope that we'll see more discussion around the disability pay gap as well, because that's definitely there. Black and minority ethnic Muslim men are 76% less likely to be employed than their white Christian counterparts. So again, it's interesting the rhetoric around people taking other people's jobs. There is still significant discrimination of disabled people in the workforce, with only 6% of young people with learning difficulties in employment. 35% of LGBT+ staff have hidden the fact that they're LGBT at work for fear of discrimination. There's underrepresentation of all groups that I've mentioned at board level in private and public sectors. And 54,000 women a year are pushed out of their jobs due to pregnancy or maternity. So do we still need to talk about this? I hope you agree, we have a lot of work to do. So in order to create an inclusive environment, organisations have to be brave and ask people what they feel and think. And then really, that's not the massively brave bit. The massively brave bit is not to be defensive and not use data as what I call javelins to deflect people, but actually act upon what they say. However, in order to do this, there has to be psychological safety. What do I mean by this? Well, psychological safety is a shared belief among all members of a team or organisation that the organisation or team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Well, you could argue quite easily that being inclusive isn't risky, and no, it isn't. In fact, it's the opposite. However, it does confront many people's feelings about power and hierarchy, even if they do not realise it themselves. That's where defensiveness often comes in and we don't see any change. Team growth and development happens when mistakes can be made and everyone can learn from them for the better of the team or organisation. At an individual level, this means being aware of how you're feeling and talking about it with trusted colleagues and considering how you want to get the message heard. This might be different methodologies and you might have to have a couple of goes at it because you might not be heard in the way that you want to. And at the team level, you need to set the culture collectively. What do we want this team culture to look like? What does inclusivity mean? What does inclusivity look like? It's important to model positive behaviours. So ask open questions to get others to think about their practices, so not just the majority benefit. How do you find out your blind spots? Ask questions and push yourself out of your comfort zone. And then reward, recognition and review are when things are done fairly. Are people recognised? And I'm not just talking about a £10 voucher for a particular shop. That's lovely, but actually how are they really recognised, rewarded fairly? And who inputs into the reviews and how are people supported if things aren't going well and when things aren't going well? It's got to be, again, proactive and not punitive. It has to go beyond the tick box approach. And a few events that really don't delve deep or result in culture change might not necessarily go beyond that tick box approach. And as fantastic as charter marks are, it really has to go deeper than that. So I appreciate you can't change the world in 1 week, but there are a few things you can do to get started. So the first thing I would say is start the conversation or revisit your staff survey results, both quantitative and qualitative results. This is really important. Look at what your staff is saying as well as the overarching figures. Can you delve deeper? What things can you change quite quickly? What are your staff telling you about inclusion or exclusion? The second thing is inclusive employers who created and run this week have prepared some resources and you can sign up to them at the Inclusive Employers website. The information is in the show notes. And then always have an agenda item about inclusivity at your meetings, whether that's low-level meetings, middle-level meetings or high-level meetings. Think about, is the room that you have your meetings in accessible? Were minutes and agendas sent out beforehand? And this isn't just about physical accessibility, but also mental health accessibility. We had a project that someone decided to run for the Calibre Disabled Leadership Programme, and their project was all about minutes and agendas being sent out in advance because they had anxiety and seeing things in advance really helped them. So things that you might think aren't particularly important have a huge impact on people. Can everyone see each other in a meeting and see each other speak? Often people who acquire hearing impairments need to know this, but they might not be willing to tell you about their impairment straight away. Who gets the most airtime at meetings? And what time is the meeting? Do you have it in core hours, or do you have it after some people might need to go home or come in late for caring responsibilities? And also, can everyone attend a meeting if you work at split sites? Just some things to think about. One resource I love is Jonathan Ashong-Lamptey's podcast, The Resource Group's Company. He has a weekly podcast with insights and tools to enable you to address these challenges intelligently. And again, the link is in the show notes. And the fifth thing is to keep learning and know that you will never know the answer to everything. I certainly don't, but you can always try that little extra. I hope you found this useful, and if you want help with your inclusion strategy and how to make it a day-to-day reality for everyone, you can read more on the Diverse Minds website. I've got 2 blogs related to the week. One is a guest blog called 8 Practical Ways to Build an Inclusive Workplace, and another one related to TetraMap, which is Inclusive Leadership is a Journey, not a Final Destination. And as always, do pop me an email. I'd love to help. Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.